62 years ago today, the 29th of November 1961, was the day thalidomide was withdrawn from sale in Australia. Every day between then and now, Australians affected by thalidomide have been owed an apology. Today, they will receive that. Today, at long last, Australia will say sorry. I want to acknowledge and welcome all the thalidomide survivors and their families here with us in the Parliament. I extend that same respect to all those watching from afar, here with us in spirit. You have been survivors from the day you were born. More than that, you have been advocates, organisers, champions and warriors. Time and time again, you have summoned remarkable resolve. You have shown an extraordinary strength of character. Yet for so long, parliaments and governments have not proved equal to this or worthy of it. Too often, we have let you down. Today, your presence lifts all of us up. And together, today, we mark an absence too. At the conclusion of these proceedings, we will join in a minute's silence to remember and honour all those this tragedy took from us far too soon. Because this apology will forever belong to those Australians as well. Mr. Speaker, thalidomide was recommended to pregnant women to help with anxiety, insomnia and morning sickness. All over the country, expectant mothers were assured by doctors and chemists and advertisements that this drug was perfectly safe for them and for their baby. Even though in Australia at that time there was no meaningful or worthwhile way of knowing this was true. There was no system for properly evaluating the safety of medicines. And the terrible cruelty of thalidomide was that far from being safe, just one dose was enough to cause devastating harm. Just one dose was enough to inflict a lifetime of damage on an unborn child, or indeed cause premature death, either in utero or in the years ahead. A survivor named Patricia put it like this: thalidomide is like tossing a stone into the water. It causes a ripple effect. The drug didn't just destroy me. It rippled onto my parents, my siblings, my family, my ambitions, my relationships, my jobs, my earnings, my health, my everything. Those ripples ran through lives around our nation. Bullying and teasing at school, trauma and sadness at home, exclusion and rejection when looking for work, a constant battle against declining health and increasing need, hidden struggles and invisible pain, the 1,000 different ways that ordinary tasks can be ordeals, and mothers and fathers and families haunted by a lifetime of undeserved regret, a regret that could never be reasoned away because it was fuelled by that all-powerful, all-consuming instinct that every parent knows, that inescapable sense of responsibility for your child's health and happiness. So let it be said today and recorded for all time. These parents, these mothers did nothing wrong. These parents did not fail their children. The system failed them both. Yeah. Which is why, as so many survivors has requested, the apology we offer today embraces and includes their parents and their families as well. Mr. Speaker, here is the apology. Today, on behalf of the people of Australia, our government and this Parliament offers a full, unreserved and overdue apology to all thalidomide survivors, their families, loved ones and carers. This apology takes in one of the darkest chapters in Australia's medical history, when expectant mothers, through no fault of their own, were exposed to a drug with devastating effects that were realised far too late. To the survivors, we apologise for the pain thalidomide has inflicted on each and every one of you each and every day. We are sorry. We are more sorry than we can say. We are sorry for the harm and the hurt and the hardship you have endured. We are sorry for all the cruelty you have had to bear. We are sorry for all the opportunities you have been denied. We are sorry for the battle you have had to fight over decades for fair support and due recognition. And we are sorry that there are so many who deserve this apology who have not lived to see this day. We offer our respect to their memories and we extend our deepest sympathies to their families and friends. To the mothers and fathers today, we apologise because you were failed too. We are sorry you have endured decades of knowing your children's lives are harder than they should have been. We are sorry you have suffered your own hurt, even though what happened is not your fault, and it never was. We are sorry not imagining that these words can resolve the anguish or remove the pain. We understand an apology does not balance years of inaction and inadequate support. We know the toll of thalidomide is still felt today. We know it will still be felt tomorrow. We promise your legacy and your example will never be forgotten. Mr. Speaker, a national apology was the first recommendation of the 2019 Senate inquiry chaired by former Senator Rachel Siewert. I thank her and other committee members from across Parliament for their important work. I recognise the initiative taken by former Prime Minister Morrison and the support that his government provided. But without question, the heroes of those proceedings are the survivors and their families who shared their stories with such searing honesty, the people who put on the parliamentary record a hard truth too long denied. Their courage demands that at the heart of this national apology must be an acceptance of Australia's moral responsibility. So today, as we express our sorrow and regret, we also acknowledge the inescapable historical facts. The fact that even after the grave dangers of this drug were known, importing thalidomide was not prohibited. Selling it was not banned. Products and samples in surgeries and shops were not comprehensively recalled or entirely destroyed. Saying sorry does not excuse this or erase it. There are no words that can undo what has been suffered. There is no sum of money that can square the ledger. But our Australian commitment to a fair go for all demands that we try. That's why the former government established the Australian Thalidomide Survivors Support Program, a lifetime support package which includes a one-off lump sum payment in recognition of pain and suffering, as well as ongoing annual payments. To date, 148 survivors have received this support. Today I can confirm that my government is reopening this program to ensure that anyone who may have missed the previous opportunity to apply does not miss out on the support they need and deserve. Further to this, for all survivors who currently receive the annual tax-exempt payment and any new applicants who qualify for it, I want to make it clear that from now on, rather than these payments being locked at a particular level, we will act to ensure that support increases through indexation. Mr. Speaker, one of the Australians who spoke to the inquiry was a woman named Mary. In November 2018, she said, "I wasn't really meant to live outside of infancy, and there have been many days throughout my life when I wish I hadn't." Imagine that. And imagine what it takes to share those words with people you've never met. Mary was one of many survivors who requested a meaningful and public apology from government. She also spoke about a lasting memorial. As the remarkable Lisa McManus put it, permanent recognition in our place of prominence, a monument to acknowledge all those Australians who died prematurely, to recognise the pain and suffering of survivors and their loved ones, and to stand as a tribute to their courage, resilience and perseverance, a way for Australia to honour all they have endured. Tomorrow, in Kings Park, on the northern shore of Lake Burley-Griffin, the Minister for Health and Aged Care will formally dedicate the National Site of Recognition for thalidomide survivors and their families. It will offer a space for reflection and contemplation, along with the gateway of glass bricks chosen by the artist to represent the ripple effect across lives, and an information display that will tell the story to every visitor. As Survivors has requested, this will be much more than a plaque in a park. It will be a prompt for our collective conscience, a call to our nation's heart. It will remind every member and senator and public servant and passerby of the moral obligation that each of us hold as representatives, as decision makers, but yes, also as Australians. I conclude today by saying to the survivors, their families and loved ones here with us, and all of you watching or listening around the nation and even overseas, the people of Australia are offering this apology to you. And make no mistake, we are offering this apology because of you. You deserved this apology, and you made it happen because you fought for what was right, because you spoke the hard truth until it was heard, because you knew that you deserved better, and because you continued to demand better from your government, your parliament, and your country. For 6 decades you have had to carry this cause. Now the challenge is on all of us here to do better for you. Together, I know we can, I know we must, I know we will. I commend the national apology to all Australians impacted by the thalidomide tragedy to the House of Representatives.
Yeah. The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I give the call to the Honourable the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Prime Minister, thank you for very heartfelt and moving words. The Coalition commends you for delivering the national apology on behalf of the Australian Government and the Australian people. As a federal opposition, we stand with the Government in saying a heartfelt sorry to all Australians impacted by the thalidomide tragedy. Sorry to the survivors, sorry to those who are sadly no longer with us, and sorry to all of their families. There are some 150 Australians alive today who are affected by thalidomide. To these survivors and families who honour us with their presence in the gallery today, and to those who can't be here with us but are watching the broadcast, I want to simply say this: you are more than owed this apology, and this apology is more than overdue. It's an apology which should have been made long ago without your repeated asking. But with your repeated asking, it is an apology which, without your repeated asking, it is an apology which could not have been made today. Although this apology is delayed, it is made today with the deepest sincerity and sorrow. And I thank you for being people of profound principle and patience. With this apology, the Australian Government acknowledges its historic accountability for the role it played in the thalidomide tragedy. With this apology, the Parliament expresses, on behalf of the Australian people, our profound regret for the tragedy which has befallen too many lives. Thalidomide was made in 1954. It was first sold in West Germany in 1957. It was marketed as a safe drug for women to take to help relieve morning sickness and nausea during their pregnancy. Unbeknown to expecting mothers, taking just one tablet could cause significant birth defects. For so many parents, that most magical and joyful moment of childbirth turned into one of consternation and constant heartbreak. Their precious babies were born with broken, bent and blemished bodies outside and in. And as babies grew into children and children into adults, survivors had to contend with lifelong battles which most of us can never fathom. Battles of the body and battles of the mind, and battling the sometimes unforgiving and judgmental environments in which they found themselves, particularly in childhood. Survivors have lived with a myriad of physical health issues such as organ damage, sensory loss, nerve impairment, debilitating pain and repeated surgeries. Survivors have lived with a multitude of psychological health issues such as depression and anxiety and feelings of social isolation, including from bullying, harassment and indifference. Survivors' parents have lived with guilt and trauma, which in some cases cost them their relationships. Today we are aghast that this drug, which has caused incalculable wretchedness, was once called a wonder drug. Thalidomide was distributed in 46 countries and given to literally thousands of pregnant women. Worldwide, some 100,000 babies are estimated to have been affected by the drug. But it's impossible to know the precise number. Thalidomide is known to have also caused miscarriages, stillbirths and perinatal deaths. Medical experts predict that as many as 10,000 babies were severely affected by the drug, of which there are less than 3,000 survivors today. Thalidomide was distributed for sale in Australia between the 1st of August 1960 and the 29th of November 1961. The drug was finally prohibited on the 9th of August 1962. That short period of just over 2 years from sale to prohibition created a national black hole which pulled in families across Australia. Survivors have struggled and suffered. Their families have suffered and struggled. And yet, commendably, many Australians affected by the drug have been, or certainly have endeavoured to be, fiercely independent despite all that has befallen them. And even more, the surviving adults have courageously campaigned for compensation and this apology today. During the Senate inquiry into support for Australia's thalidomide survivors, many first-hand accounts were provided in person and in writing. These accounts speak to personal tragedies and to family tragedies, which collectively constitute a national tragedy. I want to quote some of the excerpts from these first-hand accounts to illuminate the many tragic layers. There is the tragedy of the physical ramifications of the drug, and one survivor wrote, "Under the advice of her doctor, my mother took thalidomide and later gave birth to me. I had undeveloped arms, only 2 fingers on each, and an extra toe. There are other underlying conditions that weren't obvious at the time: heart problems, enlargement of part of my esophagus, no gallbladder." Another said, Thalidomide has robbed me of many opportunities to have a normal life, such as being able to hear, play sport and having children. There is also the tragedy of the psychological consequences of the drug, and one survivor noted, "I 100% blame thalidomide for stealing my dignity, my self-worth." Another survivor powerfully wrote, "This took away my ability to be independent. I always had to have someone to help me. I could never go anywhere by myself like others could. This made me angry and frustrated." There is a further tragedy lived by families, parents and especially mothers. One mother said, and I quote, "In my shocked state in hospital, I was not helped by some of the staff's comments and suggestions, such as put him in an institution and forget about him." Another survivor stated, "Mum lives with so much guilt for taking that one tablet. The guilt has eaten her away. She will have that guilt to the last breath she takes." But perhaps the totality of the tragedy on all those impacted by this destructive drug is summed up by these profound words of a survivor. "The question of how much thalidomide affected my life is simple. It affects me completely. Every single step of my journey has been governed, decided upon, influenced or impeded because of thalidomide. I can't escape it as it lives with me every day." Today, we set the record straight. We acknowledge the part the Australian government played in this tragedy. In 1960, the Australian government allowed the importation of thalidomide. No steps were taken to test the drug prior to its distribution and sale around the nation. And in early 1961, Australian obstetrician Dr. McBride and German paediatrician Dr. Lenz independently identified the link between birth defects and the drug. They then proceeded to communicate and report their findings. But even after the drug was prohibited from being imported into Australia in August of 1962, adequate steps were not taken to ensure stocks were not sold. Following the tragedy, the support provided to survivors fell far, far short of their expectations and was less comprehensive than what was provided in other countries. So today we acknowledge the Australian government's threefold historic failure. Its failure to ensure that the drug was tested, its failure to act with necessary speed to prohibit the drug and communicate sufficiently to the public to prevent its sale and use, and its failure to provide survivors with adequate compensation and support to cope with the long-term impacts of the drug throughout their lives. The national apology is not made today because we can fix the failures of the past. We cannot. This national apology is not made to suggest that we grasp the extent of the hardship and the heartache endured by Australians impacted by thalidomide. We never will. This national apology is not made because we believe it will dull the torment or make the daily lives of survivors any easier. We would be naive to think that it could. But we make this national apology as an expression of a historical dereliction of duty, an affirmation of a recognition of responsibility, as a proclamation of a profound sense of regret. With this sorry, we acknowledge national shortcomings. With this sorry, we take the important step in strengthening the soul of our democracy through our reverence for the truth. I conclude my remarks by acknowledging several parties. First and foremost, I thank all of those survivors and witnesses who courageously provided evidence during public hearings in Melbourne and Sydney and testimony in 71 written submissions. I pay tribute to the senators and the Secretariat which assisted them for the inquiry, final report and recommendations concerning support to thalidomide survivors. Thirdly, I acknowledge the former coalition government led by Prime Minister Morrison and especially the former Health Minister Greg Hunt for responding to all 11 recommendations. I acknowledge the presence in the gallery today of Greg Hunt, who did many great things as Health Minister, perhaps this his greatest. In our 2020 budget, coalition government, the Morrison government, allocated a support package of $45 million to survivors. I appreciate the acknowledgement from the Prime Minister today. This included a one-off lump sum of up to $500,000 for every survivor, as well as an ongoing annual payment for lifetime support, and we welcome the government's advice in relation to indexation and the extension of the application process. It provides additional support separately through the NDIS and pensions. The Coalition committed to this national apology and the public memorial. And I also want to thank very much the Prime Minister and his government for bringing these issues, these things to fruition. My final remark goes to the survivors. None of us can pretend to comprehend the dark days that you've endured. But I know this: despite every setback, despite every hardship, and despite the difficulties yet to come, your lives have mattered, your lives have meaning, you have meant so much to so many, to your families, to your friends, to your colleagues, to your fellow Australians, and to any Australian who is striving to be resilient in adversity, who is searching for stoicism in difficulty. You only need to look to the examples of the survivors of thalidomide for the inspiration that you seek.
I ask all members to remain in their place and those in the gallery as the Parliament shows respect to all Australians impacted by the thalidomide tragedy. I ask all present to observe a minute's silence.